Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Nick Stevens. Our co-host Bob Phelan is out this week, but Nick and I have plenty of news to break down as the Orioles have been busy in the week since the Major League Draft, signing new players into the system. The Orioles in the past week have signed several players from this year's draft class, highlighted by the top 3 picks in the draft. So we're going to break that down and look at some of the players that remain unsigned at this point and how they could fit into the farm system. So, Nick, I'll just start right here with really what has been a pretty quick pace of progress for the Orioles getting these players into the system. Ike Iris, Bahio Loy, and Caden Bodine have been among the prospects that have signed in the past week, and those 3 players represented the top 3 picks in the Orioles draft class. They all signed for around slot money. So, what have your thoughts been on this so far?
I love that the negotiating window is 2 weeks. So we quickly get these guys signed into the system or know who isn't going to sign and move on. And then just switch our attention to the trade deadline. And the minor league season is actually not too many more weeks left in the minor league season. So it's nice just to, especially with, as you know, we're going to talk about Slater DeBrun, I'm sure, tonight, but especially with all of the rumors and discussion going on there, it's nice that this is a compact 2-week window, and all the rumors and craziness with some of the bigger signings can just kind of hurry up and close. We can close that chapter. But yeah, not surprised at all. Looking at the top 3 guys there, Irish, Bodine, and Aloy, not surprised at all that all 3 of them signed for full slot. Just thinking as like they all fell from where they probably should have been selected. So they're still getting their money with full slot. And the Orioles have been able to save a lot elsewhere while also still having the largest signing bonus pool ever. So as of right now, we got one guy in the top 10 rounds not signed. I think we only have one guy in rounds 11 through 20 signed that's been announced so far. But as of right now, I really like where the Orioles are sitting in terms of who is signed, and as far as who hasn't signed, how much money is left, and where this class is sitting at right now. So pretty pleased. The enthusiasm from draft nights 1 and 2 is still carrying over even more as these guys sign and hopefully start seeing some game action in the next couple of days.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point you just made there, Nick, which is the amount of money that they have left, because they got the top 3 picks for basically slot money. And if you look at the players since then, selected a little bit lower in the draft, Jaden Loray, who was a high school shortstop drafted out of Arizona, had a commitment to BYU. The Orioles had to go over slot to get him into the system, but they have been able to save elsewhere. JT Quinn signed out of Georgia for a little bit under slot, as did Joseph Giroux out of Michigan State. And then you go further down within the first 10 rounds, and the Orioles were able to have pretty significant savings with Kalen Hampson in the 8th round, as well as Dalton Neuswander in the 10th round. So there's still a lot of money left over.
Yeah, we're sitting at about 4.1 million, because they announced that Colin Yeoman signed. At least all the beat writers said he is signed, but I still haven't, as of half hour ago when I last checked to make sure before we came on the air, still haven't seen any announcement there about what his signing bonus was. But I mean, you look at where he was drafted, he's $600,000 slot value. He didn't enter the portal after the season. He's not committed to a bigger school to try to get a little bit more leverage. So I imagine he is at most slot value. So let's say around approximately $4.1 billion they've got left to sign Slater DeBrun, and then rounds 11 through 20 guys. Well, 12 through 20 guys, because round 11, he was 11, right? Holder DeJong. Yeah, New Jersey Tech pitcher who was recovering from Tommy John surgery this year. He signed for, Brian Recca announced he signed for $150,000. So you got $4.1 million for DeBrun and picks 12 through 20, picks in rounds 12 through 20. I think most of it, I think you see 22 guys in this class get signed, to be honest, including DeBrun. And honestly, I was looking at the other guys who did sign, though, and like where they maybe could have saved more. I'm honestly kind of shocked that Hunter Allen got $147,000. He was the 7th rounder D2 guy out of Ashland. He is a senior out of the D2 ranks. I thought they'd probably give him an even smaller signing bonus, but good to see him get his money. And then RJ Austin, I think, was the other guy that a lot of people were like, The Orioles only saved $3,000 there, but he's at Vanderbilt, still got another year. So it makes sense. The Orioles are clearly very high on Austin, but still over $4 million right now is like I said, they're sitting pretty good. I like how this class is going to end up shaking out.
Yeah, I thought in the situation with Austin, that was probably about right because Austin does have a little bit of leverage in that he could go back to Vanderbilt and with a better season offensively next year, could have conceivably moved up the draft boards. We talked about some of the concerns surrounding his hit tool after day two of the draft, but it's clear that with the athleticism that he provides and the versatility, he's a good guy to add into the system. I think the Orioles were able to get him at a reasonable rate.
Yeah, I don't really see anywhere else too. Like Braden Sloan from TCU, the lefty, and Braden Smith, two Bradens spelled differently. I don't see either of them going over 150K. You got 20th rounder Connor Gear. I don't see him getting above 150K. You look at last year, Isaiah Salinas and Evan Yates, they were 17th and 20th rounders respectively. They got 150K, and I don't think Gear was committed anywhere. I could be wrong. He was a freshman this year. I don't know if he's returning to his junior college or if he had a commitment elsewhere, but if he's committed somewhere else right now, I don't think it was, a lot of these other guys who are committed to Oklahoma and these bigger SEC, ACC, Big 12 programs. I don't see Gear getting above $150,000. So, I mean, who among that round 12 through 20 are you like super concerned about? I think there's still going to be enough to kind of spread around above that $150,000 limit you can go to. I think there's going to be enough to split up here between Brian Arancia and Denton Byler and hopefully Jimmy Anderson, get those guys signed. And in my mind, the only question marks I think are going to be 12th rounder Daniel Lopez, who announced his commitment to Kansas, but then said he's 50-50 on whether he's going to sign or not. And then Cole Johnson, the 18th round high school outfielder out of Georgia.
Yeah, Johnson felt like at the time a guy that the Orioles were really going to have to work hard to get into the system because he is committed to Georgia next year. And then in the case of Lopez, I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to talk about him before we switch over to Slater DeBrun. It did seem from that tweet that he put out last week that he was committed to going to Kansas. He was not going to sign in pro ball. But as you've noted there's a 50-50 possibility perhaps the Orioles could sign him. Just based on the way these things sometimes play out, I never rule anything out until we're past the deadline because we have seen a lot of cases over the years where players were believed to be very signable and then it fell through for whatever reason, whether it was a physical or the bonus issues, or a player seems very strongly committed to his college, but the team is able to go in at the 11th hour and sign him. A perfect example would be Carter Young, was set to transfer to LSU from Vanderbilt the year the Orioles drafted him. That was a little bit different situation because the Orioles had money left over after their deal with Nolan McLean fell through. But that's an example of where, okay, this guy's not coming into the system. And then at the last minute, it's announced they sign him.
And DeBrun could get a bonus, signing bonus that's not as high as maybe some people think he might get. And the Orioles could go back to Lopez and say, all right, we've got $400,000 here for you. Is that your number that you want? Because I think the quote he spoke to like a local news outlet, and the quote was basically like, I've got a number, and the Orioles haven't matched it yet. Which like we're entering. You asked this question on draft night, and we didn't really get to talk about it because picks started really coming in. But we're entering this unknown waters here. We're seemingly entering this new era of college athletics every single day, it seems like. But looking at baseball specifically, we aren't 100% sure how NIL and now revenue sharing are going to fully impact the draft. Even college juniors are transferring to bigger universities in hopes of or securing bigger NIL bags, potentially more revenue sharing money, and they're still holding more leverage and more power than they have before. So like, and even if the NIL money and rev share money isn't quite up to par with what their signing bonus is going to be, like you still get to play in front of electric crowds at fantastic facilities with great coaches, these big fun college towns, while still being able to pocket $100,000, $200,000, $250,000. If you're really good, $300,000 plus dollars. Like it makes betting on yourself by returning to school, I think a little bit of an easier decision, or maybe it makes it even more difficult because now you're like, do I bet on myself? And if I fail, if I get hurt, if something happens, I've still got $250,000 in my bank account, as long as you didn't blow it in that year or two of college. But like I've still got this safety net, and I still get to go live the college life, be the big shot on campus, and I'm not playing in Salisbury, Maryland, in front of 100 people for the Delmarva Shorebirds. Like, it depends on like your own. We don't know the personal goals and personal financial situations of these guys, so it's a case by case basis. But like things are changing in the college world at a rapid pace. Players are getting more power than ever before, and I think it's awesome. Um, Set your dollar amount and don't budge from it. I have no issues with that at all for with any of these guys. But I do think maybe it sounds like that's why I think Lopez is the only one where like if you got to give DeBrun more money and Lopez says, "Oh, there's not enough for me to match my number," okay. And if Cole Johnson, like we talked about in our draft recap, was probably the just in case pick, in case there is extra money, they could say, "Hey, we've got 450K. Will you sign?" And if not, he's like a draft and follow type situation, and that's fine too. But if you can still get 22 out of the 24, with potentially 23 with Daniel Lopez, if there happens to be enough money, like that's a fantastic job getting all these guys to sign. But yeah, we just don't know. This NIL stuff, the more money that's flowing, it's going to make negotiations, I think, trickier. It's going to make it's again, these kids have more power than ever before. And it sucks from like the fan perspective. We want to see these guys sign. It probably is not as fun from the team perspective because they want to get more deals done. But from the player side, I think it's awesome, to be honest.
Yeah, and the point I was making on draft night was that there's a lot of unknowns with NIL across the board, but I think it's especially a gray area in baseball because when national sports media focuses on NIL, it always is centered around football and basketball. So we don't really know the full extent of what it looks like in baseball because these players, at least nationally, aren't getting anywhere near the level of coverage that they would if they played football or basketball, except for maybe during the College World Series. You go back a couple of years ago to Paul Skeens at LSU. He got a lot of coverage, but that was also because the draft was right around the corner. And that was a name that people had to pay attention to. Otherwise, you just don't feel, I feel like you don't hear as much about college baseball at the national level. So we still have a lot of unknowns when it comes to NIL. I do think it's going to make it different. I don't know if it's necessarily going to make it harder for teams because you can move your money around like the Orioles are trying to do in this draft, but it definitely makes things different. And let's
Yeah.
go now to Slater DeBrun because
Yeah.
as the dominoes fall with players signing out of this draft class, you kind of get the sense that the Orioles are managing their bonus pool as if they know they're going to have to go above slot to get Slater DeBrun, who was chosen with the 37th overall pick in this year's draft, committed to Vanderbilt. The slot value for that pick is $2.63 million, but the sense is that the Orioles are going to have to go higher to get him to go away from Vanderbilt. One thing I will say is that I know that he's an aspiring country musician in addition to a baseball player. I would hope that that has no impact on his decision going forward because if he wants to pursue that lifestyle, he can do it in Nashville in the offseason. He doesn't have to be at Vanderbilt for the next 3 years to do it. But I know that it's something that's on a lot of people's minds, and there's already been a lot of speculation out there that the Orioles aren't going to get a deal done with DeBron. And I have my own thoughts on that. But Nick, I want to start with, open up to you here. Seeing how things are playing out, and granted, we don't know a lot from DeBrun's side of things, how negotiations with the Orioles are playing out. But from what we've seen so far, are you at all concerned that the Orioles aren't going to sign him?
Not really. No. I mean, this is too much money. I mean, yeah, you can look back at the number of players in his position who haven't signed as what, like single digits. First 10 rounds overall is a small amount, but getting picked this high, 37th overall, and just the slot value alone, you're looking at, like, what'd you just say, $2.63 million for pick 37 overall. The Orioles could go up to 3.5 million and still have what, 600 plus $1,000 to spread among all these JUCO arms that they drafted rounds 11 through 20. Like that's why I feel so confident about them getting a deal done, because they can go pretty high and still get the majority of the rest of their class signed as well. Like there's been no like actually sourced hard information about where negotiations are at. So it's all conjecture right now. It's just the rumor mill is churning. People are freaking out. People are freaking out because he hasn't mentioned the Orioles on social media. Like this, what are we even doing here? Like this, the agent is playing hardball, and a lot of this could be the agent. Like you're also like, we don't want to sit here and be like, have this negative impact or this this negative outlook of De Bruyne, like he's demanding more money. It's probably a lot of his agent behind the scenes knowing the Orioles situation and playing this to get his guy as much money as possible, which like you can't blame him, to be honest there. But yeah, it's just there's nothing. They still got another week. We're recording this Monday night. We still have until 5 p.m. on the 28th. So even if it's 4:58 p.m. on Monday, like he can milk this for every second that he can if he wants to. They probably will. Any of these rumors that the Orioles had zero contact and took him without any, it's no, it's all BS. No one knows. We don't know anything for sure. So I have zero concern. This is he could be, let's say it's 3.5 million. I don't think it'd be more than 3.5 million, but let's say it's up to $3.5 million. This is an 18-year-old kid with the Orioles are putting $3.5 million cash money in front of his face. Are you going to turn that down? And you cannot return, you can't be drafted again for 3 years after this. So like go bet on yourself. That's fine. Go do that. You're not going to make $3 million even at Vanderbilt, the historic program that it is, the SEC powerhouse that it is, the NCAA tournament runs they're going to go on. You're not looking at $3 million over the next 3 years at Vanderbilt, most likely. And you were already picked 37th. There's not too much more wiggle room to move up. And a lot has to go right over those 3 years at college to make more money in the draft 3 years from now. So I don't know. I'm not him, so I have no idea. We don't know any of the side stuff, how big of an impact that's going to have, but I have pretty much zero concern that he's not going to sign. I think he's going to sign. The Orioles can give him a big enough bag, and we're all going to be happy at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree. It's not going to come down to an issue of money because the Orioles have plenty of it and they've managed their bonus pool correctly to this point. I thought that there was a chance, and I think I even said this on draft night, that they might have to go over slot on Vahio Aloy because Aloy's talent, he probably should have gone a little bit higher than he did in the draft, but they got him for slot money. They didn't have to overpay for Ike Iris. They didn't have to overpay for Caden Bodine. In the way that the rest of the draft class has shaken out so far, they've largely managed avoiding going over slot for these players. Now, I wish I could remember who it was, and I apologize for not having the username right here with me, but someone on our Discord had suggested today, had questioned whether or not Song Gamble signing with the Royals for $3.9 million could be a comp for DeBrun. But it seems like from where you're sitting, and what you would expect his bonus to be, that might be a tad on the high side.
Yeah. Gamble was he was 23 overall.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What did he get? What'd you say again?
3.9.
3.9? Yeah, no. I think 3.5 max is where they're going to go. And it could probably get done for even a little bit less than that, to be honest. Whatever it is, yeah, I just it's outrageous. And I get it's slow. The major league team isn't really giving us anything to watch. This is an exciting kid. They nailed those first 3 picks. They knocked it out of the park. They nailed the entire first night. This draft class as a whole, 11 through 20, maybe doesn't have the bigger names, but the more you learn about a lot of these JUCO arms, and they're all throwing 98. They've got deep pitch mixes. These are fun, look like really fun, intriguing young arms to join the system. Like you get so hyped up about the talent that they brought in. The Orioles needed to nail this draft, and they did. And if there's even that little inkling of hesitation that maybe he won't sign, even just that little bit, people are freaking out and gonna take away and run with this. That's why I'm glad we got a week max, less than a week now. of this before we find out for certain. But I would like 99.9% sure. Maybe that's famous last words. Rewind the tape if it is. But I'm 99.9% sure this kid signs. And I don't see him going up to $4 million. Going 1.4 over slot value, like I don't see that happening, to be honest.
And let's consider what DeBrun would have to do in this case if he doesn't sign. As you pointed out, you can't be drafted again for 3 years. So you got to go to Vanderbilt and bet on yourself to probably make top 10 pick money in 3 years. That's going to be a lot more. And yeah, it's going to be a bigger bag, but a lot can go wrong in those 3 years. Or you could play well enough to be in that area, well enough to fall in the top 10 range as prospect in the draft in 3 years. But then some other guys have better years, or the teams that are picking those areas start to cut deals. And next thing you know, you're falling on draft night. So there's a lot that can go wrong. And at the end of the day, it's Slater DeBrun's decision, and we should respect whatever he decides with that. But it's a huge risk to turn down upwards of 3.5 million to bet on yourself for the next 3 years.
Yeah, and I know before the draft, it was a Joe Doyle tweet. I just remember this, so I can't go back live right now and find this through all his other draft tweets. But I know he was tweeting out before the draft that apparently what he was hearing was that agents for the high school kids were more willing to tell their guys like, hey, if you get the offer, if you get drafted early on and you get this offer, take the money. Because when you look at college, right, college baseball, as much as I'm a college baseball junkie. I'm a fiend for this stuff, especially this year fueled my passion for college baseball. I love the sport. But what's one of the biggest things you see people when they start watching more college baseball and getting into it, and they watch these bigger guys, they're like, oh, I know him. He's going to be a potential first round. Cade Anderson in the College World Series is a perfect example. People get excited. They're tuning into Cade Anderson because he's on ESPN, one of the few times that ESPN decides to show on ESPN or ESPN2 a college baseball game. And they see Cade Anderson go at 110, 120 pitches in June at the end of the year after he's just worked a full season in the gauntlet of an SEC schedule. They get to tournament time and people see these college coaches run their pitchers into the ground. College coaches aren't so much concerned about these kids' development. College coaches don't have time to sit there and develop all of these high school kids and hope that a guy like Slater DeBrun or anyone in that situation pans out 2 years from now, because their job is on the line right now. Like if you're an SEC coach, look at Mississippi State this year. They fired their coach in the middle of the season. I believe Texas A&M did as well. Like you're on the hot seat. And maybe Vanderbilt's a little bit different. You look at who their coach is and how long he's been doing this. But still, at the end of the day, college coaches are always on the hot seat. Priority number one is to win baseball games. And with the way the transfer portal is now, and if they have access, if they can get these kids more NIL money, they're much more likely going to say, we have an open spot here in our outfield. I got a hot shot high school prospect coming in. He's going to need a little bit of work, though. I don't have time to work him into the lineup right now. If he hits from the start, great. There was a kid the Orioles drafted a couple years ago. He went to TCU. I forget his name. He was a freshman this year. He was amazing for TCU. Lucky for him. But like these coaches don't have time for these kids to develop. They're going to go hit the portal and say, give me $150,000. Let me go hit the portal and get a junior from an ACC program. He's our everyday starter now out there in right field. Like that's what they're going to be more concerned about. And I think I saw some reaction to that. And I think Joe was largely kind of proven to be right in that what he was told, an assumption that maybe that's going to start the transfer portal is going to impact that as well. So something else to think about there when looking at this.
Yeah, and I want to pull some historical context into this too and focus. You just noted a few minutes ago that the number of players that have been drafted as high as DeBrun was that haven't signed is very, very small league wide. But looking at the Orioles' history under Mike Elias specifically, there has only been one player chosen within the first 10 rounds that the Orioles did not sign during the Mike Elias years. I cut 2020 out because that was only a 5-round draft, but every player that was drafted that year is signed. It was in 2022, Nolan McLean. I think he was the 81st pick overall. didn't sign because he and the Orioles couldn't agree to a new dollar figure after the Orioles were concerned about the results of his physical. That was not a money issue. I mean, maybe it was in the grand scheme of things, but if Nolan McLean's physical goes differently, he signs. So
Mm.
the Orioles under Mike Elias don't miss on these things.
Yeah, and pitchers are going to be a different ball game too when it comes to all of this as well. So yeah, this when you like, I know Elias and anyone in the organization, they're going to say what they're going to say, right, publicly. But like Mike Elias wasn't kidding around when he said they needed to nail this draft. Like we all know, we've talked about it all year. The infield depth specifically, how that's lacking. Look at the AAA and AA depth overall. I mean, there's not a ton in the upper levels of the minor leagues. Once you get past Dylan Beavers and Judd Fabian, and of course Samuel Basayo, but you get past those top guys, there's really not a ton of big time prospect depth down there in AA and the rest of that AAA lineup. Yeah, it's coming. It's in the lower levels of the system right now, but like you're between graduations that this organization has had over the last 2 years, between trades that they've made last year, trading a lot of guys to get Zach Eflin and other deals they made. Like this, you see how quickly the farm system, even the league's top farm system, can thin out. And so if you need to be more aggressive, hopefully 2026 is a new year. I know a lot of people are probably down on that based on the way how the season's playing out. Don't want to think about that yet, but 2026 is hopefully a better year. This offseason is hopefully a much better offseason. Not only do you need to refill the cupboard in terms of talent, but you also need to refill because to be aggressive with these trades and hopefully in more activity that's going to have to take place over the next year or two to get back into contention. So knowing you have to nail this draft, I don't see why you take a complete shot in the dark with your 37th pick overall. Uh, Maybe they did. And let's just say they did. They took a complete shot in the dark. They say this kid's falling. Let's risk it. You still get the pick back next year, right? Maybe is it one after? I think I saw. So it would be the 38th
Yeah, it's
overall
one
pick.
after.
Okay, so you still get the 38th overall pick next year. You get that bonus pool money next year. You get it taken away out of this year's class. So that's still plenty of money to get. Maybe you go back to Lopez, you get Lopez and you get Johnson signed. You get everyone else but DeBrun, and you get that pick back next year. That's worst case scenario, but I just don't think, knowing you had to nail this draft, I don't think you waste the 37th overall pick on a high risk gamble like this.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's been one of the biggest misconceptions flying around is that the Orioles get nothing if they don't sign DeBrun. That is not true. They do get a pick next year. And as you said, not signing him could open up the opportunity to sign some players otherwise might not join the organization. But hopefully it doesn't come to that. And with that, now we will head into our final segment, Last Call, brought to you by Checker Spot Brewing. Located 1421 Ridley Street, Checker Spot is not far from Camden Yards, making it the perfect place for a pre or post game drink. And when you're at the ballpark this year, be sure to check out the beer stand behind home plate where you can get one of Checker Spot's signature beers, The Bird is the Word. And this week, we are back to our normal final segment where we shout out players outside the top 30 portion of our top 50 list for something they've done recently, whether it's been a good game, a good week, or is just something interesting in their stat line that we want to point out. And Nick, I will start with you here because I kind of like this group of players that you're highlighting this week.
Yeah, I wanted to go with Reed Trimble because he had it was a shortened week for the four full season affiliates. They only had Friday, Saturday, Sunday last week, but he's having a great month of July. Just to highlight him real quick, but maybe we should talk about him in more detail in the next couple of weeks. But my hitter, I'm going Andrew Tess, 18-year-old, 12th round catcher. I'm pretty sure we've mentioned him in this segment at least once already this year, but he's having a very solid season in the FCL. Last week, he hit 267 with a double. He walked 4 times, struck out just 2 times, and swiped 4 bases. There's a brand new article up on our Substack this morning to plug that. A couple of guys I think are going to be promoted in the next week or two. And spoiler, Andrew Tess was one of those guys. Kind of under the radar a little bit just because he's hitting 244, but he's an 18-year-old catcher learning to call a game, handle a pitching staff, doing all the work that catchers have to do. I can't speak to the defensive improvements because we don't have access to FCL video, but the majority of his playing time has come at catcher. So he's getting a lot of work in there. Plus, first base, left field, and right field. So they're moving him kind of all over a little bit when he's not behind the plate. But I think the offensive numbers stick out even more considering that fact, his age and the position he's learning. He's got a 453 on base percentage and nearly as many walks as strikeouts. He's got 31 walks to 38 strikeouts, and he has 17 stolen bases as well. So I think he's just having a really good, solid season down there in the FCL, and he's kind of getting buried because there's so many backstops in this system. But I wouldn't be surprised at all, even with Ike Irish and Caden Bodine probably joining an affiliate sometime soon. I still think Andrew Test could see some run in Delmarva in the next week or two. The FCL season is wrapping up here in the next couple of days, so keep an eye out for him. And then my pitcher is Carson Dorsey. We were very excited to get to watch him this year, and then he went on the 60-day IL. So he just recently returned. I think we highlighted him once he came back just to make people aware of Carson Dorsey has returned. He's here. You should pay attention. His rehab is over, and he's been assigned officially to Delmarva. I imagine they're probably just going to leave him in their rotation and let him build up innings the rest of the year. But he went 4 innings in his last official rehab start with Delmarva last week. 3 hits, 1 run, no walks, 6 strikeouts. I actually just started an article this evening on Dorsey, and I'm going back and watching that outing from, I think it was Saturday. He's got another one this week. I think they're at Canapolis, which has a really good feed upcoming as well. So lots of opportunities to watch Dorsey. I'm going to sit down with his outing, write a more detailed article about him, but he's one of the more intriguing, fun, under the radar arms to follow in the system. I think we all agree on that. So maybe 2025 is a bit of a wash because of the injury, but he's showing some exciting things so far in his rehab back.
Yeah, I've been really pleased with how he's looked as he's coming back from his injury. And I agree with you. You should see Tess and Delmarva at some point soon because A, he deserves it, and B, even if Ike Iris and Caden Bodine do go there in the coming weeks, I don't expect them to stay there very long based on how the Orioles typically handle college bats. I would expect those guys are going to at least get to Aberdeen before the season ends. I'll go to my players now, and I decided to keep it entirely in the DSL this week to shout out the Orioles' 3 DSL All-Stars, who all played a pretty important role in the game. Simone Newell had a pinch hit RBI double to tie things up in the 8th, and Newell is a guy that we've shouted out in this segment several times this year because he is having an excellent season. Entering Monday through 153 plate appearances, Newell had a 22.9% walk rate to go with a 15% strikeout rate and a 145 WRC plus. The 18-year-old is in his second year in the DSL and has made tremendous strides after putting up a solid year last year, but a year statistically where you could see plenty of room for improvement, especially with the hit tool. He's been driving the ball this year, showing some power, showing a lot more patience at the plate. He's cut down the strikeouts. He has been great this year. Lisandro Sanchez also appeared in this game, walked, stole a base, and scored a run. And then Lorenz Sosa will be my pitcher this week. He pitched a scoreless 9th inning to get the save. All 3 of these guys, obviously, as all-stars, have put together really solid years. And Newell has been added onto our top 50. And I expect that we're going to see him somewhere on there when we update the list next month after the draft picks sign.
Yeah, I'm glad all 3 of those guys. Good to see them get some run in the DSL All-Star game. AL All-Stars won. Love to see that. But yeah, I wish we'd see more of the DSL kids move up to the FCL. Some of the older guys that are excelling well, but I get that's a little bit more difficult. But FCL, can we please get full video coverage next year? Because next year's FCL squad, if you're around the Sarasota area, it's going to be a lot of fun. I think that's going to be a pretty packed team based on what we're seeing in the Dominican Summer League this year.
Absolutely. And that does it for this episode. We will be back later this week to grade your trades. We're going to take trade proposals from our listeners and grade them on a 20 to 80 scouting scale. And as part of our deadline preview coverage, you're not going to want to miss that. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels. We're over on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, and Twitch. We're also at Blue Sky, and you can find us at Substack, oriolesontheverge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon and sign up to become a member of our community today. You can sign up to the $3, $5, or $10 levels and have access to bonus weekly coverage from Bob, Nick, and myself, as well as monthly updates to our top 50 prospects list, access to patron-only channels in our Discord chat, and a lot more. So you don't want to miss that. Head over to patreon.com today to check that out. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network. Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Nick Stevens. Our co-host Bob Phelan is out this week, but Nick and I are here to grade your trades. Just like we did last year, we took hypothetical trades from our listeners and decided we were going to run them through the baseball trade simulator and grade them on a 20 to 80 scouting scale. And Nick, just to give a little bit of background on the simulator before we get started. I know that Bob is really the biggest user of that tool among the three of us, but you and I had a chance to fool around with it this weekend in preparation for this show. And I don't think it's necessarily a perfect reflection of market value, but it does give you a sense of value and what could be deemed a realistic trade versus something that seems completely outlandish and lopsided in favor of one team.
Yeah. I always hated this thing. I always said I wish you could block screenshots on social media. And I wanted to block the screenshots of everybody being like, look at this trade, look at this trade, look at this trade. But yeah, I do, and getting to play around with it, it is kind of fun. Just like the mock draft simulator tool that we were using, getting to do that whenever. It was kind of fun messing around with this. But yeah, I just kind of use it as, all right, patrons submitted their trade ideas. And so running it through that first was just like a good snapshot. Okay, is this something there were a couple that was like, okay, there's extreme value on one side. So that one may be something we won't talk about, we won't look at. But for a lot of these that even if they're, semi-close, right, it's just something an initial baseline. And then it was a lot of diving into the players a little bit more, looking at some other things as well outside of the simulator to decide if this could be a fun trade or not. But yeah, we're not basing these solely on the simulator. This is a lot of our own thoughts and opinions here, and just own little semi-player analysis as well on these guys. So, but yeah, it was fun. It's a fun exercise over the weekend to dive in and look at some of these potential trades. And for me, the most fun part, although we did come up with our own trades, a couple of them, the fun part is that the listeners got to do a lot of the work for us, which always makes it more fun, to be honest.
Exactly. And just to follow up on what you said there, yeah, Nick and I are going to have our own evaluations. We didn't use the trade simulator to come up with those numbers. We really use it more as a filter to see, okay, what trade proposals that we got in seem realistic. One anecdotal observation that I made about the simulator, which you can find over at baseballtradevalues.com, it puts a lot of emphasis on years of control, and it really does not like relievers on expiring contracts. So Sir Anthony Dominguez, for whatever reason, the simulator does not think that Sir Anthony Dominguez is going to fetch a whole lot in return. So I'll be curious to see if that actually does play out that way between now and the deadline. But I think that's a good transition to our first trade proposal, which comes from Ben Durst. He has a deal set up here between the Orioles and the Phillies with 5 players involved. Gregory Soto and Sir Anthony Dominguez go back to Philadelphia after being traded by the Phillies to the Orioles at last year's deadline in separate trades, along with Cedric Mullins. In return, the Orioles get right-handed pitcher Mick Abel, one of the top pitching prospects in the game, and one of the Phillies' top prospects, along with right-hander Gene Cabrera. So, Nick, how would you grade this trade?
I mean, I absolutely do this trade, of course. I don't think the Phillies do, though. And kind of looking around, it's kind of funny to look at, though, if this trade were to happen, and you look at outside of Andrew Painter, and of course the Phillies went pitcher heavy in this year's draft class. Gage Wood, K.W. Mueller, Cody Bowker, Sean Youngerman, they went pitcher heavy from the jump. maybe in anticipation of making some deals. But if you trade McAble and Cabrera to the Orioles here in this mock trade, outside of Painter, your top two pitching prospects, I'm looking at MLB Pipeline's list real quick, are Moises Chase and Seth Johnson, former Orioles prospects who the Phillies got in those deals. So just funny how all this could potentially work out. I don't know. We know who McAble is as a prospect, right? He had a wonderful outing against Pittsburgh. That's actually the McAble debut versus Paul Skeens was the only non-Orioles MLB game I've watched from start to finish this year. He'd be a big addition to the 2026 MLB staff. You're moving 3 expiring contracts for an MLB ready starter with huge upside. Maybe you can debate on how high you think his upside is, but Cabrera doesn't strike out a ton of guys. Walks hadn't been an issue until this year. They are back up a little bit in AA, but still a fine prospect. He is also on the Phillies 40-man roster, though. Something else to consider there as well. I like the deal a lot, but I would give it like a 45, mainly because teams can get crazy and sellers can land some pretty great talent for players on expiring contracts. But I think if you're Philly, like to get McAble and Cabrera in this type of deal, I feel like does Felix Bautista have to be moved in a deal of this magnitude? It are 2 relievers in Soto and Dominguez, plus a Cedric Mullins, who is Cedric Mullins this year. Is that going to be enough? I don't think so. That's why I give it a 45 because I like it, but I don't think this gets it done.
Yeah, that's kind of where I landed too. I'm going to go with a 45. One thing that I think has been flying around with the Orioles Phillies speculation is that, yeah, the Phillies are a good match to trade partner in a lot of respects. It would be great to get Abel, Painter, or Cabrera. I think especially Abel or Painter because those two guys are so close to Major League ready, if not Major League ready right now. Dave Dombrowski, I think, is a factor in this because Dombrowski has been aggressive over the years in moving prospects. But the point that I would make is if you look at his track record, he's generally not reckless. You look at trades years after the fact, it's like, okay, he gave up Yohan Moncado to get Chris Sale. He won that trade. He gave up Manuel Margot and a bunch of other prospects to get Craig Kimbrell. He won that trade. He won Andrew Miller and Cameron Maybin for Miguel Cabrera and Dontrell Willis. And it didn't matter that Dontrell Willis was terrible after he went to Detroit. He won that on Miguel Cabrera alone. So this, even with Dombrowski's aggression, would skew towards reckless for me because you're an organization that has an older major league roster. You've got 2 very good pitchers that probably are close to the end of their primes, if not, Zach Wheeler certainly is not out of his prime yet, but he's already dropped hints that he could retire in a couple of years. I think we've kind of already seen the best of Aaron Nola. If you don't win the World Series after you make this trade, you probably slammed your window shut for the next 5 years.
Yeah, Jesus Luzardo, you don't know what you're going to get out of him with the injury front. Like Taijuan Walker is getting up there in age. Like, yeah, the lineup specifically getting a lot older. So yeah, I agree. I know Mick Abel's a popular target of Orioles fans, and I agree. I would love Mick Abel. It's, but yeah, I'm just the biggest wild card for me is just how much and these are going to be popular names in the other trades we're going to look at as well, and maybe even some that we came up with our own, but just how much can we realistically expect to get back for like Soto and Dominguez specifically? I think that's obviously the big wild card in all of this. And hopefully it's more than what we expect, but I'm also going into this being a little bit hesitant that maybe it may not be as much as we're kind of hoping for, but that's, I feel like, typically the case with all these trades at the deadline. We're going to overvalue our guys and we're going to undervalue other teams' prospects, and we're going to overvalue our prospects, and you propose a trade and nobody likes it, nobody's happy. That's how it goes.
Exactly.
All right. Ben has another one though. I'll give you first crack at this one. He's got Zach Eflin to San Diego for right-handed pitcher Braden Nett. And Baseball Trade Values has given this an advantage to the Padres. But what do we think about this deal?
I give this one I'm going to go to 50 on this one because if the Padres think that they could get something close to the best version of Zach Eflin in the second half and into the postseason, this is probably a fair deal. But Eflin, just with the injuries that he has had this year and the inconsistencies we've seen from him when he's been on the mound, you have to question if he goes to a contending team, is he even going to be a guy that you pencil in to start a playoff game? And that's really the first question I would ask myself if I'm the Padres is, okay, maybe Braden Nett is not necessarily a long-term building block, but he's still a 23-year-old putting up good numbers in Double-A. Do I want to give that up to get a guy that has had a bad first half and is on an expiring contract and might not start a playoff game for me? So that's a real consideration that I would have. If Eflin were healthy and close to full production, I think this would actually be a steal for the Padres. But Eflin's injuries and inconsistent production this year make this one a little bit more questionable.
Yeah, I looking into Net. I didn't know too much about him at all before this, and looking into it, I like this kid a lot. Actually, the Padres' whole situation is going to be interesting to see what they do because we know AJ Preller is going to want an AJ Preller. We know that seat has got to be burning hot at this point, but on the pitching side, like you're relying on Yu Darvish. Nick Pavetta's having a fantastic year. Great for Nick Pavetta. Great for many of my fantasy teams. But like your Yu Darvish, the injury concerns there, his injury history, he's almost 39, 40 years old. Dylan Cease isn't having the greatest of years. Michael King is throwing bullpens, I think, but is Michael King going to come back this year? So it's like, how aggressive are the Padres going to be when it comes to pitching? But how aggressive can they be? Because I know I looked when coming up with our own deals, I wanted to make a deal with San Diego as well. But you look at that system and it's like, who do they have down there? And I don't want Ethan Salas. Don't need him. Don't want him. Don't care. We got Sammy Basayo. We're good. They've gutted that farm system, but Preller is going to find a way to get his guys. Even if Zach Eflin is a guy to just get them through the regular season, I could see San Diego potentially being in on that if they can't get some of their other targets. But I like Net. Undrafted in 2022, signed by the Padres after the few weeks after the draft, out of the JUCO ranks, was awful his first year in 2023. This 2024, he goes to a 25% strikeout rate. The walk rate dropped to 14%, so he's still walking a ton of guys. But he's been in Double-A all year this year, 26% strikeout rate. Walk rate is down again to 10%. He's throwing more first pitch strikes. Swinging strike rate is up. Call strike plus whiff percentage is up. And Baseball America actually just had an article here. Net mixes a deep arsenal of pitches: four-seam fastball, cutter, sweeper, splitter, curveball. Sits 95 to 97, reaches 99. We'll mix in a sweeper equally throughout starts. Good pitch mix, strong June showing. Net might be one of the more underappreciated pitching prospects currently in the minors. I think I saw a couple Padres fans doing like a breakdown of his stuff and are like, this is a 70 grade pitch about the fastball specifically. So I got a little bit more excited, and I give this a 60 because I want Braden Nett now after learning about him a little bit more. And honestly, just because it's AJ Preller, and what if Eflin? I know Eflin's been Eflin. I know he's been hurt. What if he can come back and have a couple really good outings before the deadline? What if? Let's just pretend here for a second. You might have to stretch the imagination a little bit, but let's pretend. Could you get Braden Nett, and if AJ Preller's desperate, some other targets go off the board, and now he's calling you? He's calling Michael Ice. He's calling the Orioles, and you know the desperation is setting in. Can you get Braden Nett and Tyson Neighbors as well in this deal? Strictly a relief prospect. And if you're the Orioles, if you got to sweeten the deal with some 18-year-old Dominican Summer League prospects, so be it. Like, I would love Net and throw Tyson Neighbors in the deal as well. 56 strikeouts in 37 innings this year, already up to Double-A. Again, strictly a relief prospect, but the swing and miss stuff, the high intensity fastball velo, it's all there. This kid is electric. Yeah, let's expand that deal a little bit more, get a little bit more, and I'm fully down with this trade.
Yeah, the desperation factor could be key here. If you can get AJ Preller in a spot where his targets are coming off the board and he does have to overpay a little bit to get Eflin, then I think that this becomes a real plausible option. Go to one now from Bobby Jones. And I find this interesting because so many of the proposals that we got focused on players on expiring contracts, but he has the Orioles giving up two players that have a few seasons of team control left, Keegan Aiken and Ramon Arias to the Cubs for right-hander Brandon Birdsell. Birdsell began this year on the IL, but is currently pitching at AAA Iowa. He won minor league pitcher of the year in the Cubs organization last year. So the Orioles get a close to major league ready arm and a 25-year-old Birdsell, and they'll give up Keegan Aiken, Ramon Arias to do so. Nick, what are your thoughts on this proposal?
I don't hate it. If it was Charlie Morton and Ramon Arias, if that could get it done, absolutely. Like, we don't know if Jeremiah Jackson can replace Ramon Arias on the roster, but he's certainly showing everything he can in AAA right now. So I have no idea what clicked. I don't know if anyone does, but a minor league cast off from the Angels, league average bat in AA when he signed with the Orioles, and now he's got what 30 something games in AAA and 14 doubles and 10 home runs. I don't even know what the WRC plus is right now, like 150, 160 something. He's having an insane run in AAA. So if you move Ramon Arias to a team like Chicago who could use him, you could potentially have his replacement here in Jeremiah Jackson. And Jackson could even be that utility guy next year at the major league level and be successful. Of course, we don't know if what he's doing right now is going to translate to the big leagues, though. Birdsell could also fill the Aiken role. Like, Birdsell's 5 years younger. You're going to have him. He's going to be more controlled for a couple more years. He can end up being your long reliever as well. Younger, more upside, filling that same role, maybe even be a back end of the rotation guy. Fangraphs gives him a 70 future value command, an overall 45 grade prospect with back end rotation potential. I like it, but he also missed most of this year. I think he just returned. He had some like oblique issues. He's had shoulder issues in the past. Like, I'm intrigued by Birdsell, and he's definitely the type of prospect that I want to see the Orioles add, ideally multiple of at the deadline. Near MLB ready pitching guys with real upside. Yeah, but I think they can get plenty of that with guys on expiring contracts, hopefully. So for what it's worth, Baseball Trade Values does have this as an overpay by the Orioles. And like you mentioned, Aiken has the extra years of control. That's what scares me off of this just a little bit. So I'm at like a 45 on this deal. I see the upside. And again, if it's Morton and Ramon Arias, absolutely. Forced trade. Welcome to Birdland, Birdsell. But I'm honestly a little bit more hesitant on Keegan Aiken. But I don't know how other people feel about keeping Aiken around for another year or so.
I'm a little bit higher on this one. I'm going to give it a 50 because I do think that using this approach of two guys who have years of team control left but aren't exactly irreplaceable to get something in return in Birdsell is something that's worth considering. I do have some concerns, though, about Birdsell. The ceiling, as you just touched on, is kind of limited. The injury history leaves me with some question marks, but what would be the bar, I guess, for success? And this is a good question. Okay, so you trade Keegan Aiken in this deal. You're giving up a reliever who's not going to cost you a whole lot, that in a good year can give you 70-plus innings out of the bullpen. Could you get that from Birdsell if he's healthy? Could he be the guy that steps in and, you know what, maybe he rarely ever starts. Maybe he only starts the second game of a doubleheader, or he's a, break glass in case of emergency starter. But he's there in the bullpen and he gives you 70, 75 innings a year for the next 3 or 4 years with a mid-threes ERA. Would that be a reasonable standard for success?
Yeah, and he very well could. I guess I do see the upside here with this deal because even if he fills the Aiken role as the long relief guy, like he's 5 years younger, and you've got him for many more years than you're going to have control over Keegan Aiken. So if he does reach that potential, fantastic. But yeah, and you potentially have Ramon Arias' replacement there with Jeremiah Jackson right there waiting in the wings. The injury stuff just kind of scares me. I feel like I want many bird cells in this system at the deadline because this team needs that depth. Yes, they need a whole lot more. We get that. They need more impact starters. But when you're talking about being able to sell off some guys on expiring contracts and potentially load up at least and address one major weakness of the organization, I feel like they could do that with the expiring contract guys. And I feel if it's going to take Keegan Aiken and the organization is super high on a bird cell or a similar type prospect from another organization who comes calling about a similar deal to this, then yeah, I go for it. Move Keegan Aiken. But yeah, it's just the injury, specifically with this deal, the injury history. It scares me off just a little bit. Yeah, let's go to another one. We've got 2 more listener submitted ones, and then we'll do ours. This one's from Sterling. I included this one because I think this is a good. It's good. The parameters are there for this one. It's Sir Anthony Dominguez going to the Detroit Tigers for right-handed pitcher Troy Melton. So, what do you think about this off the bat?
If I'm the Orioles, I would make this trade 100 times out of 100 because you're giving up a reliever who's on an expiring contract to get a 24-year-old who's putting up pretty solid numbers in AAA this year, good command, and could probably slot into your rotation for the final 2 months of this year. So if I look at it solely from that perspective, this trade is an 80. But looking at it, trying to balance it out and think about the Tigers side of the equation, it probably comes down in the, let's say, 55 for me, because I do question if Sir Anthony Dominguez is too low for a guy like Troy Melton. Could you get more by putting him in a, could you get a better player in return, or at least get a reliever that has multiple years of team control beyond this year and not just a guy that's going to be a rental? So that's kind of where I question this. But I really like the idea of being able to get someone who could slot into your rotation now and possibly for the next several years for someone that's not going to be here next year in all likelihood.
Yeah, I pulled this one because I think it's directionally accurate, and I like the aggressiveness. Like it looks like though there's a lot of Troy Melton talk, especially among some Tigers writers, and it looks like the Tigers could potentially bring up Melton here sometime soon and use him out of the bullpen down the stretch. 6th ranked prospect in the system. He's running a 38% strikeout rate in AAA with a 6% walk rate. 97-mile-an-hour fastball, like 7 feet of extension, 6'4", 210. This is a dude. I'd love to have him in the system. If you look at baseball trade values, it is Melton has 6.5 surplus value. Of course, like you mentioned, Sir Anthony Dominguez is negative 0.7 to their website. Of course, take that with a grain of salt. But I like the idea that if Detroit wants if their relief options get scarce, and they start getting anxious, like how high do they pay up? And I think if they come calling about Sir Anthony Dominguez, I like this trade proposal because it's like, let's start with Troy Melton. And if you're super desperate, and what if the Tigers say yes? I don't think they will. But what if they say yes? Slam dunk, this is an awesome trade. Yeah. But and again, it depends on the rank, depends on how you have these guys ranked. But could Jaden Ham be an option for Sir Anthony Dominguez? Like, this is what I want to know. Can you get this type of prospect for a reliever on an expiring contract? Or is this shooting too high? This is the biggest question I have that I would love to know. Of course, we won't know until the deadline starts playing out. But yeah, I gave this deal a 60 just because I like aiming high. I think Sterling explained the reasoning a little bit in the mailbag channel where we set the call for these prompts. And I agreed, like, start high. And if they go for it, if they bite, great. If not, can you still get another one of their pitching prospects who's maybe a little bit further? I think Jaden Ham's in AA. He's a little bit further away from the pros. And if you can, or the major leagues, if you can get one of those guys instead, fantastic. Again, Sir Anthony Dominguez isn't coming back next year. So if you can get a guy who could potentially be in your rotation in the next year or so, or by the end of next year at the latest, great. Let's go.
Well, I should point out that Jason Beck over at MLB.com reported earlier on Monday that the Tigers were promoting Melton to the major leagues, and he was slated to start for the Tigers on Wednesday. So we do have that little bit of
There you
news.
go.
Now, I agree with Sterling's logic, and I'll throw this out there as kind of something to think about in the back end. Let's say Dominguez for Melton straight up is not enough to get this deal done. Could you throw in Gregory Soto to the same trade? Here's two relievers to bolster your bullpen down the stretch. Would you perhaps dangle Ramon Laureano there? Not that the Tigers necessarily need outfield help, but he's having a good year. He's got a pretty reasonable team option that could be picked up after this year. Is that too high, or would that seem maybe about right to you?
Could be right. And if so, I do that as well. To be honest.
Completely agree. And we'll go to our last one. And I think that this one really opens up a broad discussion because not only does it include one of the more popular players on the team and the guy that has multiple years of team control, but he has this proposal has him going to a division rival. And this proposal from Devin is right-hander Felix Bautista and first baseman Ryan O'Hearn to the Red Sox for three pitching prospects: left-hander Peyton Toll, right-hander Luis Perales, and right-hander Dedison Paez. So, Nick, what are your thoughts on this?
And we had to include a Felix Bautista offer, right? I don't know. Yeah, it's like you said, it's got the division rival aspect of it. It's got your closer with multiple years of control and a window that hopefully is still wide open going into 2026. I do not want to trade Felix Bautista at all, and I would not actively be shopping him. But if a team does call about Batista, I am listening with an open mind, obviously. I think Jeff Passan updated his top 50 free agent list over at ESPN. I was reading that this afternoon and gave it like a 15% chance that Batista gets traded. I think that sounds about right. It's got to be an offer that really blows you away. And does this one, out of Peyton Toll's putting up eye-popping numbers with an unbelievable fastball. He's 6'6", 250. He's a back-end top 100 prospect, fringe top 100 prospect, depending on which list you look at. Maybe he's a potential mid-rotation guy. Maybe he's Felix Bautista's replacement in the bullpen in a year, next year in the major leagues. Perales, 22-year-old, huge velo, reached Double-A. He's recovering from Tommy John right now, but he's in Double-A already. And Paez is the younger, the more flyer prospect, high A, tons of strikeouts, very, very, very little walks in his career. Does this specific trade blow me away? No, I don't think so. I'm giving it like a 45. I like all three prospects in this deal individually, but I think I need a better headliner than Peyton Toll. And I'm a Peyton Toll believer, and I hate that he's in Boston and we could potentially, the Orioles, but could potentially have to face him multiple times a year in the big leagues. The framework is there for me. Three good high upside pitching prospects, but narrowing down to like the specific players, I don't love it. And honestly, even the division rival aspect, you're talking about a closer, you're not talking about a starter. So even if he were to get moved and it is to a division rival, I wouldn't hate it, but I would hope maybe that division rival tax would increase what the Orioles would want in return. But yeah, clearly this has caused a lot of discussion. It will be, I think the chances are maybe even lower than 15% he actually gets moved, but you never know.
Yeah, the last point you made there about, kind of a tax being a little bit higher for a division rival, I do think applies in this case. The whole meaning of trading to a division rival, I think sometimes needs to be put aside, especially when you're looking at players on expiring contracts. So you go back a few years ago when the Orioles traded Zach Britton to the Yankees. I had no problem with that trade at the time, and I still don't have a problem with it because Britton was a free agent at the end of the year. The Yankees might have signed him as a free agent anyways, and you got Dylan Tate out of that. So that was not a bad trade by any stretch at all. If Batista was on an expiring contract, I'd say, you know what? Is it going to suck to watch him close out playoff games for the Red Sox this year? It is, but he's going to be a free agent after the year, and he might sign somewhere else. And even if he stays in Boston, well, chances are the Red Sox were planning to sign him all along. But because he has multiple years of team control left, for me, the price tag has to be higher than this. That's why I'm going to agree with you here and give it a 45. I think overall these prospects are good players, and I certainly think that if you could get one of them straight up for O'Hearn, you need to give that a long look. But if you're going to put Bautista in this deal, I got to have a little bit more coming back. And it really, I've sort of settled that if Bautista is going to be traded, I want it to be to the Phillies because I think that that increases your chances of getting Andrew Painter or Mick Abel back in a deal. Um, Outside of that, I don't have a whole lot of interest in moving him.
No, I would love to know what kind of offers the Orioles are going to get though, because it looks like, at least based on the latest stuff, it looks like the A's aren't willing to deal Mason Miller. I I think I saw something about Johan Duran from the Twins. That seems iffy. It just doesn't seem like the high profile lockdown closer. It doesn't seem like there's going to be a whole lot of those options out there. So, like, how desperate does a team get? And I don't know if they get that desperate to meet what the price should be for Felix Bautista. So, yeah, I don't know. Fun to think about. I mean, maybe it's not fun to think about, but if for this purpose, it is fun to think about. But I don't see any team willing to meet the demands that he would cost. Just because, I mean, look at the number of top prospects who have been dealt over the last couple of years. People always accuse Michael Elias and the Orioles of prospect hoarding. It's not an Orioles thing; it's a league wide thing. So I I don't see a team willing to part with multiple top prospects to get a closer at this point.
Yeah, and that's an important point to bring up because no one wants to be the next general manager that makes the Fernando Tatis Jr. for James Shields trade. That trade, I think, has done more to shake the industry up than any that has come along the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And we'll go now into our final segment of the night. Last call brought to you by Checker Spot Brewing. Located at 1421 Ridgely Street, Checker Spot is not far from Camden Yards, making it the perfect place for a pre or post game drink. And when you're at the ballpark this year, be sure to check out the beer stand behind home plate where you can get one of Checker Spot's signature beers. The Bird is the word. And now we're going to do this exercise with each other's proposed trades. So Nick and I have both come up with hypothetical deals. We did allow the other to see the trade ahead of time to start looking into it more. And we're going to grade ourselves here on the 20 to 80 scale. And Nick, I'm going to let you start by bringing out your trade proposals.
Yes, let me get mine. I came up with two because I think we all want the Mets pitching prospects. It doesn't matter which one, at least from my perspective. I don't care which one it is. I want a Mets pitching prospect. And so you already had one down. I had to do one. So I did a second one. So both of our deals aren't just here's his deal for a Mets pitching prospect. But my first one is a 1-for-1 swap. And I don't know if this is even going to be enough to do it because he's just not doing anything to increase his value or make him even tradable, I feel like, at this point. But I've got Cedric Mullins to the Mets for Jonathan Santucci. Um, Again, I don't know if Mullins, like this, it's a league average bat with diminishing defensive abilities on an expiring contract. We'll see. The Mets would really have to love him, obviously. But Santucci isn't the top Mets prospect. They have this glut of pitching prospects in AAA and AA now. Jonah Tong, Nolan McLean, Brandon Sprott, others. Santucci is kind of near the bottom of that top list, but he was a favorite arm of mine. And Baseball Trade Values has this as an even swap, perfectly even swap for what it's worth. But Santucci was a favorite arm of mine in last year's draft coming out of Duke. Struggled with command a little bit. Had the injury history as well. I think it was like a rib injury that cost him some time last year. Mets still took him in the second round. He's got a 26% strikeout rate and an 8% walk rate in high A. This is his first pro season. He's up to AA now. 2+ pitches, up to 97 from the left side. He's going to have to keep throwing more strikes. That's going to be an issue, but he's showing promise early on with the good walk numbers, good swinging strike numbers, good call strike plus whiff percentage numbers. So when he's in the zone, he is effective. It's just a matter of keeping him in the zone. Lower contact rates overall. It's only a 7-inning sample in AA, so can't really go off anything there, what he's been doing. But I don't know. There's rotation upside here with Santucci. And if you can get that type of pitching prospect for a declining Mullins, who may end up leaving for nothing at this point if he keeps tanking his value like this, I don't know. What do you think about this 1-for-1 swap?
I give this a 60. I think that I would have a higher grade if it was O'Hearn. for Santucci because I think that would be a deal that the Mets
Mhm.
might like a little bit more. Although I think I know why you didn't put O'Hearn there. Um, the thing that I come back to is really how much do the Mets believe in Santucci as a starter? Because if you're looking at him as a possible rotation option, even if it is a mid rotation arm, to give up 6 years of that for a couple months of a guy that probably is your fourth outfielder just isn't a great deal. But if you think that he's going to be a reliever, then I think you have to be open to that possibility of, okay, yeah, you are giving up 6 years of a reliever and potentially a good one in Santucci. But if Cedric Mullins bolsters our outfield depth down the stretch and he has a good postseason, this trade is worth it. So that's kind of what I wonder is internally, what do the Mets really think about Santucci's chances to start? Because I think that would affect the plausibility of this trade. But one thing I think we do know is that the Mets are not afraid to make big swings like this. This is a trade that I think would scare off some teams, but the Mets I feel like would probably be more risk averse in this case, for better or worse.
Yeah, I figured with the Mullins trade, let's not shoot for the top pitching prospects. We did go down a little bit, but he's still a good pitching prospect. My other deal is this is what we were talking about with what can we get for these relievers on expiring contracts, and I went with Gregory Soto. I wanted to find a deal to the Cubs, but I've got Gregory Soto to the Cubs for right-handed pitcher Will Sanders. It's he's 6'6" righty out of South Carolina. Again, he is near MLB ready, and this is what I want a lot of at this deadline. Fourth round pick in 2023. He's in AAA already. 39 innings, a 3.89 ERA. Clearly, I think he's adjusting to the AAA baseball and the AAA strike zone, which we know is very small. Because in AA this year, he had a 25% strikeout rate with a 5% walk rate. But in AAA now, he's got a 21% strikeout rate with a 9% walk rate. And like this deal honestly just came out of my being fixated on finding something that sends a reliever to the Cubs and is different from the other Cubs trade we just talked about. And with Sanders, like, are there tweaks you can make in his profile that can unlock more swing and miss and make him a more viable, like back into the rotation pitching prospect? If so, great. If not, is Gregory Soto for a potential like long relief type pitcher? Is that a more realistic option? What we're going to be looking at for a Gregory Soto return? That is the big question for me at this deadline. But yeah, I like Will Sanders just because he's near MLB ready, and you need a lot of these arms to get through the season, and Will Sanders could be one of those guys for you.
I give this deal a 70 because it's one that I would make 100 times out of 100. And I do think that it is plausible, especially if the Cubs think that Sanders is going to end up in the bullpen. And depending on what scouting report you read with Sanders, you might come away with some different conclusions. I do agree that some of the dip in production that we have seen in AAA this year is pretty explainable when you consider the changes in the baseball and the strike zone. But given some of the struggles we've seen pitchers have, not just in the Orioles system, but across the game in the last few years, I would actually say that Sanders is making that transition okay. His numbers at Iowa aren't setting the world on fire, but 3.89 ERA, 4.52 FIP over 39 to third innings is nothing to be ashamed of. Strikeout rate, 20%, walk rate, just around 9%. So he's putting up pretty solid numbers. And for the Cubs, you get a reliever that could really help you down the stretch. And you give up a guy that might slot in as your number 5 in a year or two if everything breaks right. But for the Orioles case, you're absolutely right. They need more pitchers like this towards the top of the minor leagues. And even if they don't think Sanders can help them this year, it's worth bringing him in now, especially because he's not Rule 5 eligible for another year. So you're not adding to your Rule 5 roster crunch. You're getting a guy that you can slot at worst in Norfolk's rotation next year. And you can give it time to figure out, okay, is he a starter? Is he going to be a reliever? Could he have a Braxton Bragg-esque stuff jump after coming over the Orioles system? Yeah, it's something that might not happen, but it's a possibility that I think you could dream on. I really like this move.
I didn't even think about the Rule 5 stuff. That's something else to consider too that I did not. So I'm glad that in that scenario he still has an extra year. But yeah, that's what I want. I want controllable, young, near MLB ready arms, and I think that's what we're going to get. I have this feeling that the returns aren't going to be as high as a lot of people want with some of these guys, unfortunately. But if you can address at least one of these weaknesses, which is pitching depth, if you can address one of these, it's a win this offseason. I know it's not a big win. We're still banking on the Orioles having a major offseason, but it's a win nonetheless, which I feel like we can take any win we can get at this point. But your trade.
All right, so I have a trade between the Orioles and the Mets. Ryan O'Hearn would be going to the Mets in this scenario. The Mets get an immediate upgrade at DH, give themselves another power bat down the stretch. And I threw in Heston Kjerstad, knowing that I don't know what his future is going to be in Baltimore. And thinking ahead to this offseason, Judd Fabian and Dylan Beavers are both going to be Rule 5 eligible. If they're not promoted to the major leagues before the season ends, you're absolutely going to protect both of them. So you have in-house replacements. You can open up a spot in your outfield on the 40-man roster now by giving up a guy who, based on what we saw this year, I don't know you can count on as part of your long-term plans, but who could reasonably benefit from a change of scenery. And if the Mets don't expect to keep O'Hearn after this year, they could pencil him in as his replacement next year. And coming back from the Mets, I have Blade Tidwell highlighting this package. Tidwell is not the top pitching prospect in the Mets system, according to most lists, but you're getting a guy at AAA who's pretty much major league ready, if not very close to major league ready. And then I wanted to sweeten this deal a little bit more for the Orioles. So I looked for a mid to upper level minor league arm who has a few years left before he hits Rule 5 eligibility. And I settled on right-hander RJ Gordon, who the Mets chose in the 13th round out of Oregon in last year's draft. He made his full season debut at High A this year and was very good over 67 innings, was recently promoted up to Double A. It feels like his command is going to dictate whether or not he ends up as a starter, but there is a long man ceiling here with Gordon. And because you do have those years left before he is Rule 5 eligible, you've got time to figure it out. So you get him over in the trade, you put him in Chesapeake's rotation for the rest of the year, see if you can get the walk numbers down, and then evaluate, by this time next year, is he in Norfolk? Do you see him as a starter or reliever? So that's my hypothetical.
All right, I'm going to bump. I knew nothing about Gordon, so I'm going to bump it up to a 60 because I like that. Again, more depth. Here's Tidwell. I pulled these up earlier. Let me see if I can share them. I don't know how many people are watching live. Most of our listeners come audio, so this may be for whatever, but let's see if I can share the image. Share screen. Nope, can't do that. Image file. Let's try that. Here we go. Does that work? Is it popping up on your end?
Yep, there it is.
That's the wrong one I wanted first. Okay, well, that's for anyone watching live. That is Blake Tidwell's StatCast card this year. If you look at his baseline stats, they're maybe not overwhelming. But when I was diving into Tidwell a little bit more here, like that's lovely. For people not watching live on YouTube, it's bright red StatCast card. Hard hit, whiff, barrel percentage, all 86 to 96 percentile. Fastball velo, 94th percentile. End zone contact rate, 78th percentile. 90th percentile K to walk. And even better, here is last year, because he spent a decent chunk of time in AAA last year. Here's a StatCast card for Blake Tidwell last year. Let's see. Is that a different one?
Yes.
No. Yes?
Oh, let's see.
No, it's not.
There we go.
This one. Try that one. We're learning to share on the fly here on my end. This is, for the few people watching live, Blake Tidwell's card from last year. Did that one come up? Should say Blake Tidwell 2.
I've only got one version of the card on my end.
Oh, well. All right. Well, it's blue. It's a lot of blue. Blake Tittle has had a lot of improvements this year. If you dive under the hood, the swing and miss stuff. I can stop sharing that one. The swing and miss stuff. I'm gonna leave it. Nope. The swing and miss stuff and all that is fantastic this year for Tidwell. So yeah, that's why I like this show. I think he's more the unheralded of the pitching prospects. Jonah Tong is the flashy guy, of course. Santucci is just a personal preference for mine because of his college days at Duke, but Tidwell, even Brandon Sprott, if it's him, I know, and this is just because this morning, actually, in preparation for this, I happened to see a tweet from Chris Clegg. If you're listening to this show, then you know who Chris Clegg is. You're a prospect fiend. But Chris had a tweet that showed Sprott has completely changed his pitch usage, and the results since he's vastly changed his pitch usage have been much better. So I'm even down for Brandon Sprott at this point. I just want some of this Mets pitching prospect love because they've got a lot of it. They're all nearing the MLB ready level. Give me one, give me two. Let's attack these guys. If it takes O'Hearn, Mullins, whoever the Mets want, I'm down to trade him to New York.
Yeah, the reason I settled on Tidwell was that when I looked at the top tier of pitching prospects in the Mets system, he was having a better year than Sprout, but maybe not the flashiest numbers. So, would the Mets want to give up Tong or McLean for half a season of O'Hearn and a complete lottery pick or a lottery ticket in Kjerstad? Probably not, but I think Tidwell might be achievable.
I don't know.
Of course, we'll see how things. Oh, go ahead, Nick.
When is the deadline? How many days do we have? How many weeks do we have?
10 days.
10 days. Great. Perfect. 7 days until the draft signing deadline that we just talked about in the last episode, and 3 days later till the MLB draft or trading deadline. So it's going to be a fun 10 days. We'll say that. Hopefully it's a fun 10 days.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will have plenty of coverage for you here at Orioles on the Verge. Not will we have our regularly scheduled shows, but if one or two major trades do happen between now and the July 31st trade deadline, we might have some emergency shows. So you're going to want to keep an eye out on our social media for that. And we have many social media channels. We can be found over at Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, Twitch, and Blue Sky. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon and sign up to become a member today at the $3, $5, or $10 levels. Once you sign up, you will have access to bonus weekly shows from Bob, Nick, and myself, as well as monthly updates to our top 50 prospects list. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.